Hey guys, another video for our how to do stuff in Japan playlist, and it's another one of those heads up videos. Not much you can do except perhaps understand what's happening. So we've talked about in lots of previous videos about how in Japan the most important thing is always about maintaining the harmony. So whatever it takes to maintain the harmony, whether you have to lie or whatever you have to do to maintain the harmony, that's what's expected to be done. There's another aspect to that. Japanese people talk about feeling the air, or reading the air might be another way to say it. And it's sort of the equivalent in English would be about feeling the atmosphere or reading the atmosphere of a situation. And usually Japanese people are pretty good at it, you know, picking up on the atmosphere of a situation, usually. However, it's interesting if there is some bad air for whatever reason, and I'll give you some examples in a moment. They often, not always, they often never get over it. Right? So in some of our cultures, when you have relationships with people, sometimes you might have some misunderstanding or some uncomfortable thing happen, and then you go, don't worry about it, it's water under a bridge, forget about it, you know, because we know in the big picture, we know that person, we get on with that person, and if one of us messes up one day, it doesn't matter, it's water under the bridge, don't worry about it, you know. However, in Japan, quite often, they can't do that. They can't get over it. So I'll try and give you some examples. What triggered, actually, just briefly first, what triggered this video is one of my kids was on the phone to her friend and asked if she could do something, and I said no, and then she went and asked her mother, and I ended up getting a bit annoyed with her, and I said to her, hey, don't do that. If I tell you no, don't go ask your mum. I said no, you can't do it, you know. And her friend was on the other end of the phone. She heard it, and her friend was supposed to be coming to our house, and the next thing I know, my daughter's telling me she's not coming now. And I said, why is that? And she said, oh, bad air. Right? Actually, she said bad cookie, so she only speaks English to me usually, right? But because it's a Japanese thing, she said to me, I said, why wasn't she coming? She said, bad cookie, right? Bad cookie, because bad atmosphere, because she'd heard me getting grumpy at her friend, you know, she heard me getting grumpy at my daughter, so she didn't want to come to the house if there was going to be bad atmosphere, right? And I mean, you know, most cultures we come to, you know, if I go to my friend's house and he gets in a bit of trouble with his mother, you know, I don't care, right? You sort of water off a duck's back, right? It's just water under the bridge, you don't care, right? But here, quite often people here are so sensitive to that sort of thing, you know? So that's what got me thinking about, and because she said cookie in Japanese instead of air in English, that got me thinking about it more too. And then once you start thinking about these things, you can think of more and more examples, right? So I'll give you some more examples. There's a story I told years ago. It's a really long story. I'm not going to tell it all again now, but there was a situation where a dude probably should have just told me something, but instead of doing that, he told a mutual friend, and that mutual friend, instead of telling me, all Japanese people, right? All Japanese people in these stories. So the guy should have told me something. Instead of telling me, he told a mutual friend. Instead of the mutual friend telling me, he told his wife. And instead of the wife telling me, who I knew, she told my wife. And then it finally came back to me, right? And so it was really bad. And some of you might remember at the time my wife was heavily pregnant, and the doctor had said to avoid stress and avoid going out of the house. But all this drama ended up involving her going and meeting this woman at a restaurant somewhere and getting stressed out, right? Which is just a big mess. And it was the lady's husband told me later that he thought she'd done the wrong thing, that she should have just stayed out of it and pulled her head in and not done anything instead of ringing up my wife, you know. So he thought she'd done the wrong thing, and I suspect that she thought she'd done the wrong thing as well. And so what happened was, next time we went to their house, because we'd go to their house occasionally, there was bad kooky, right? There was bad atmosphere, and I was trying to be cool, but you know, I'm not very good at being fake, right? I'm not very good at being fake, so I wasn't real happy with her, and I was polite, but I wasn't real happy with her, and it would have been fairly obvious, and she was pretty uncomfortable as well. This is the wife we're talking about, okay, the friend's wife. So there was bad kooky, right? And she never got over it. That was about 15 years ago. It was about 15 years ago, and that guy and I are still sort of friends, and we meet now and again. Actually, he's my friend, he's also my accountant. So we meet at least once a year, but often more than that. And he's a really good guy. We get on really well. And I used to get on really well with his wife and his kids. But ever since that bad kooky event, that bad air event, she's never got over it. And I've said to him lots of times over the years, let's have lunch, let's have dinner, invite your wife, I'll invite my wife, or let's go have a barbecue, let's do this. And he's always up for it, but she just can't get past it. You know, I had another one once where she asked me to help her with some English stuff. It was a business thing, and she had some business stuff in English, and she asked me to help her and asked how much it'd be, and I told her how much I'd charge her for it. And when it came time to pay me, I'd been quite clear in writing how much I was going to charge her for it, and whether she misunderstood or whatever, and she didn't give me enough money. And so next time I saw her, I said to her as politely as I could and gently as I could, oh, look, really sorry, but you know, we said this amount and you've given me this amount, and maybe a mistake, I'm really sorry, really sorry, really sorry. Maybe I didn't explain it properly, and you know, said all the right polite Japanese stuff to get around it. But the problem was I'd drawn attention to her mistake or her doing the wrong thing or whatever, and that created bad kooky, right, bad air, and as a result of that, never heard from her again. She paid the money that she owed me, and then I never heard from her again. And we used to do business now and again. That was it. That was it. And what it is quite often is, it doesn't necessarily mean, it might have been because I'd done something wrong, or it could be because they've done something wrong. I had another one. I've got another one for you. I had a woman once, years ago, I was doing a private English lesson with this young dude. And he was a really pleasant young man, and we'd had a few English lessons, and he was fine. He was really good. And one day, I don't know what was going on, his mother was having a bad day or something, and she was in the kitchen, and she started, and the kitchen was right beside where we were sitting, and she started throwing things around. And she was throwing things around the kitchen and really losing her cool, really losing it. And so we sort of just kept going with our lesson till the end, and then I got up and got my stuff together, and I was just being cool, and I sort of said, okay, I said to her, okay, see you later, you know, see you later. And she didn't answer, and I don't know what had triggered her. I don't think it was me. I don't really know. It was just a normal day, a normal lesson. Nothing was different from the ordinary, but she totally lost it, and I never heard from her again. And I think it was because in that case it was clearly I hadn't done anything. So in that case, clearly she was upset about something, and she lost the cool in front of me, which which damaged the harmony, right? Took away the harmony and created some bad air, and I never heard from her again. So it's sort of interesting. It's sort of, some of you might remember a video I made years ago called what was it called? Paradoxes, contradictions and paradoxes. That's what it was called. And in Japanese life, there's so many contradictions and paradoxes, and some of you guys who've watched a lot of the videos will often call me on it, because we'll make a video saying one thing and then we'll say something else, and it'll be an example like this. Well, someone will say, wait a minute, but if they're all about maintaining the harmony, why is it that they can't just go, oh, that's water under the bridge, and move on? That they then have, or in this case, the bad air, right? Because of that one case of bad air, we then have bad air forever, right? For eternity. And some people might rightly point out the hypocrisy of that, or how confusing that is, right? Why is that? And it doesn't make sense. It's possibly partly because the Japanese way is to not go at things directly, and not to say, oh, listen, really sorry about last week, you know, I really lost my cool there, I'm really sorry about that, and then I could say, don't worry about it, it's water under the bridge, forget about it, you know, don't worry about it. which would be the way some of us would handle something like that. But that's not the Japanese way. To bring it up and talk about it again and deal with it is not the Japanese way of doing it. They prefer just to avoid it. So in the case of my friend's wife, it's easier for her, rather than for her to see me again and us to say, hey, listen, you know, sorry about that, it's all right, it's all good, and move on, or pretend it never happened. Instead of doing that, she'd just prefer just to never see me again, and then she doesn't have to deal with it, right? Even though I regularly see her husband, it's easier for her just not to deal with it again. And in those other cases I stated there too, it's easier for them just to never have to deal with it again. Well, it's different for us. I mean, for some of us, it sort of hangs on. Every time I see that guy, and I see him at least once a year, sometimes 2 or 3 times a year, and we get on really well, and I always say to him, how's your wife and how's your kids, and you know, and now and again I'll say to him, we're really got to have a barbecue sometime with our wives, you know. And I know it's not likely to happen now. It's been 15 years, it's not likely to happen, but it's sort of, for me, that bad air has continued for 15 years. Anytime I talk to him and he mentions his wife, or I ask him about his wife, it reminds me of that bad situation that I had with his wife, you know. And those other examples too, that lady that lost her cool in the kitchen and was throwing stuff around, I drive past their house sometimes and I often wonder what happened there, you know, what upset her that day that set her off, you know. I don't know, it could have been me, but I really don't think it was, because it was just another day. I'd been there a few times, nothing was different. I suspect something had happened to upset her, and the Japanese way is you should never upset the harmony by behaving like that. And I suspect that, you know, she was so ashamed of her bad behaviour that she just couldn't face me again, and that was it. So it's really funny, just for the sake of that losing of the bad air for that short period of time, they let it go on for eternity. And just try to forget about it and pretend it never happened, sort of thing. My old friend in Toyota, he used to have loads of examples of this. He used to say it all the time. You know, when we did talk about this, I'd tell him what had happened with me. Oh yeah, there's this woman who's lost it in the kitchen, you know. And then he'd tell me his examples, and he'd tell me that, you know, because he had an English school in Toyota, and he taught kids and adults. And I remember him telling me a story about some ladies that he had in a group, and he was teaching them, and everything was good. And then suddenly she was off me, he said. One of them was just off him, didn't like him anymore, didn't want to be around him anymore. And it was something that he'd said or done, or something that upset him, that upset her, that created some bad air, and that was it. He never saw her again. She was off me, he said. And he actually, I mean, he's a fairly outgoing sort of guy. He used to say all sorts of things that used to upset people, and he had a lot of stories that ended with, and she was just off me, and I never heard from her again, you know. And my English friend, he also has an English school as well, and he tells stories like this too, about parents that just suddenly, you know, get some bad air, and that's it. So it's sort of, it's a, why do I keep forgetting that? Paradoxes? What in paradoxes? Not hypocrisy. What is it? It's contradictions. Contradictions and paradoxes. It does seem like a huge contradiction, doesn't it? That if you're so concerned about maintaining the harmony and not having bad air, why wouldn't you just resolve it as soon as possible and move on? You know, which is, in most cultures, that's what we do, wouldn't we? Hey, listen, mate, sorry about yesterday. I'm really sorry about that. I made a real dick of myself. I'm really, really sorry. And that the other person say, oh, it's all right, don't worry about it. You know, water under the bridge, forget about it, right? And you'd move on, wouldn't you? But just Japanese can't communicate like that. Usually, I mean, there are exceptions to this. There are exceptions to this, but usually, this is what they're like. They're just, they can't go at things head on. They find that too confronting and too uncomfortable, and so their way is just to avoid. And so if a situation's arisen that was uncomfortable and that was, you know, disharmony, had too much disharmony, had too much bad air, a bad atmosphere. If there was a bad atmosphere created, they'd prefer just to forget about it and not have to deal with it again. And, you know, I think perhaps even more so if they did it. They're possibly more forgiving if someone else does it than if they do it. I suspect my friend's wife felt more bad that she handled that situation badly. You know, I mean, I didn't do a good job of pretending it was all good when I did see her. So, I wouldn't be surprised if it was my fault, but I sort of suspect that she felt pretty bad, because he said later that he thought that she'd done the wrong thing, that she should have just stayed out of it. And I suspect that she might have thought the same thing. And she found out later too that my wife wasn't supposed to leave the house, and that she was supposed to avoid stress, and that, because of this lady, she was made to leave the house and get stressed out, and it wasn't really good. So it's possible that what made that situation worse was how she'd behaved, and that she probably feels bad about that and just can't deal with facing me and talking to me, Possibly. Who knows? This is the other thing that you've got to get used to with Japanese relationships, or relationships with Japanese people, is the yoko wakarane thing that I don't really know. And all these situations, you'll notice, I'm only hypothesizing, because you never sit down and talk about it. That English guy I mentioned, he and I have had some small things now and again that come up, like they do when you have a relationship with someone. And hey, listen, mate, sorry about Sunday. Forget it. I thought you were talking about this. No, I was talking about that. Oh, look, I'm really sorry about that. Boom, 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 bang, we sort it out. Big hug, all good, right? And we move on, And it's clear to me then what his thinking was. It's clear to him what my thinking was. We both understand each other. Oh, that's finished. Okay, we move on. But in Japanese culture, they don't do that sort of thing. That sort of discussing your thinking and your feelings, usually with another person, and sorry about that misunderstanding, I thought it was this. They're just not geared for that sort of stuff. So there's always this sort of a hidden thing where you hide your real feelings, all about maintaining the harmony, so you've got to pretend everything's good even when it's not. And then when they do have a problem like this, they just not very good at dealing with it, or not good at dealing with it at all. And this leaves you with this yoko wakarane thing, don't really know. And that's you notice all those examples I just gave you. What was her story? The lady that lost it in the kitchen, why did she lose it in the kitchen? Don't really know. The friend's wife, why is it that she's not comfortable seeing me anymore? Don't really know. It could have been that I didn't handle it well enough, or she could be embarrassed that she didn't handle it well enough. Don't really know. And this is really common here, and you'll actually get it. My wife will tell me that she had a plan to see someone or do something, and then it was changed, and I'll say, what happened there? And I don't really, yoko wakarane, don't really know, and they're cool with that. They're quite cool with the yoko wakarane thing. They don't need to know, A lot of us, there's that one house with that lady that lost it in the kitchen. I drive past that house now and again, and every time I drive past that house, I think, what happened there? What happened there, And I've only given you a handful of examples. I've got dozens of examples like this. They're just situations where people that I used to see now and again, that I don't see them anymore. And why don't I see them anymore? Don't really know. Was it something I said? Was it something they said? What's the reason? Did they move house, or don't really know? It's life in Japan, and Japanese people are really comfortable with it, They don't need to know. Situations will come up all the time, not necessarily relationship stuff either, just any sort of stuff. My wife will call up City Hall about something and be on the phone for 30 minutes, and she gets off the phone and I say, what happened with that, and don't really know, yoko wakarane. She's on the phone for 30 minutes, and at the end of it she doesn't really know, and it doesn't really bother her. It seems to be a thing with Japanese thinking. They don't really seem to need to know. If they just accept it. Then the next thing that they say is shogunai. It can't be helped, or it is what it is. Shogunai, can't be helped. And they just accept it. They don't really know why, but it's just what it is, and so they just accept it, which is sort of fairly logical thinking, really. But for some of us who aren't Japanese, it could drive us nuts. But it's the only thing you can do is try and do that too, is that when you get a situation like this happen, that's why I made this video, because if you live in Japan for a period of time, every foreign person I've ever known in Japan's had at least a handful of these stories about this person they had a pretty good relationship with, and suddenly they were off them. I actually get emails now and again from people who'll tell me, I spent 3 months in Japan and I met this girl. Usually it's a guy meeting a girl, and she was really good and we had a really good relationship and I thought it was going to go somewhere, and then I came back to my country and then she just stopped emailing me. She just stopped answering my emails. I've had that so many times. It's alright, he's going the other way. I've had that so many times where you get this mystery thing where the dude thought he had a good relationship with this girl or with another guy or with somebody, and then they just stopped emailing and don't know why. Stopped answering my emails. Don't know why. And it could have been for a number of reasons. It could have been something he said or something he did or something he didn't do or something he didn't say. Who knows? And you just got to accept it. It can drive you nuts if you think about it too much. And some of these will keep coming back to you, they'll come back to you and go, oh yeah, what happened with him? What happened with her? What happened there? That lady in the kitchen, that's a one. That's a funny one because she was always so cool. She was always so cool and happy and friendly and cool. And this is the other thing is too, of course, they're very good at putting up the front, having up the fake, giving the fake image of everything's cool and groovy. And so that's the other thing that'll often surprise you with things is you'll think that lady in the kitchen, I mean, I've been to that house a few times, it was all good, the kid was good, she was nice, we got on really well, there was never a hiccup, it was all smooth and happy and cool and groovy, and then suddenly she's throwing stuff around the kitchen, like really throwing stuff around the kitchen and slamming doors and totally losing it, and then I walked out and I never heard from her again. And I was cool. I said to her, okay, see you later, thank you, see you later. Never heard from her again, right? And so that's the other thing that often surprises you with these situations is it's hidden behind this veneer, and you get this image that everything's cool and groovy, and then suddenly, and that's what my mate in Toyota used to say all the time, it was all good, and suddenly she was off me. And he's got no idea why, it was all good. I had this good rapport with her, it was all good. Suddenly she was off me. And my English friend said similar things too about parents of his students, that it was all good and then suddenly it's not good anymore and you don't know why, and you'll never know why. And you've got to accept it. It drives you nuts sometimes because you wonder what happened there. You don't know why, you'll never know why. You just got to accept it. So, the air, the bad air in Japan. Feel the air. They say it sort of means feel the air or read the air is being aware of the atmosphere, Sometimes people are saying yes, but really the answer is no. You've got to feel the atmosphere. Sometimes they say read behind the words too. That's a little bit more about what's being said, of course. But read behind the words is similar to read, in English we say read between the lines, don't we? But yeah, feel the air is even harder because it's just picking up on the atmosphere. Picking up on the atmosphere of what's going on. And they're really good at it. They're really, I don't know if it's good at it, but it's really strong for them, the atmosphere. And quite often that you'll think there's nothing wrong with the atmosphere and they think there is. There is something wrong with the atmosphere. That's the Gardaman there, was holding up a sign saying the car park was full at Starbucks. So if you want a coffee at Starbucks at the moment, you're out of luck. Car park's full. Anyway, that was it, reading the air. As you can see, living in Japan is not easy. There are many mysteries and many things that you have to accept. You have to accept just not knowing stuff and never knowing. And lots of mysteries and I don't know why. Yoko Okadanai, don't really know. And the big one, Shogunai. Shogunai, it is what it is. It is what it is. It can't be helped is sort of what Shogunai is. A lot of Shogunai goes on. Lots of Yoko Okadanai, lots of Shogunai, lots of good kooky, lots of bad kooky. We have to do our best not to create any bad kooky. Don't be making any bad air. It'll get you in trouble. Anyway, that's enough of that. More videos coming soon.